Welcome, dear traveler. You've returned once again to Whispers of Warcraft, where the tales of Azeroth unfold not in war cries and battle horns, but in gentle whispers, spoken slow and low, for those who seek rest in the stories of legends. Tonight, we turn our gaze far from the cities of men and the fortress kingdoms of elves. We journey instead to the wide-open skies and warm red winds of Nagrand, a land of ancient stones, quiet herds, and broken skies, where a boy lived beneath the shadow of his father's name. His name was Garrosh Hellscream. You may know him as a warmonger, a tyrant, a destroyer. But before he raised armies, before he sat on a throne, he was only a child of shame and of exile. So close your eyes now. Let the grasslands roll beneath your feet. Let the wind carry you far away. This is the beginning of the last Hellscream. Nagrand, the heart of old Draenor, a place of wide, golden skies and gently swaying grasses painted in hues of crimson and rust. The air was dry and warm, always humming with the distant calls of windrocks and cleft hoofs. Floating isles drifted above the savanna, each one crowned with trees and waterfalls that poured endlessly into the clouds below. To the orcs who lived there, the Mag'har, the uncorrupted, Nagrand was sacred, a final refuge after the world had turned against them. After the clans had fallen to fell magic and bloodlust, after Draenor itself had begun to break apart. In the village of Garadar, tucked between cliffs and ancient stones, the Mag'har lived in quiet survival. They farmed, they hunted, they remembered, and they mourned. Among them, there was a boy who rarely spoke. He kept to the edges of the fire, his gaze cast down. He did not laugh with the other children or chase the wind. His name was Garrosh, and he was the son of Garrosh Hellscream. Garrosh was born into silence. No one dared speak his father's name around him, not in joy, and certainly not in reverence. Garrosh, once the proud chieftain of the Warsong clan, had been the first to drink the blood of Manaroth, the demonic pact that doomed the orcs to slavery under the Burning Legion. It was a choice that led to the destruction of Draenor, the loss of their honor, and the corruption of everything the orcs had once stood for. To the Mag'har, Garrosh was a symbol of that fall, and Garrosh, his child, was the living reminder. He grew up in Garadar surrounded by whispers and glances. Mothers pulled their children away when he approached. Elders looked through him, never at him. And his mother, Golka, tried to protect him. But even her warmth could not shield him from the unspoken truth that he carried something tainted in his blood. Garrosh was not allowed to forget who he was. And worse, he didn't want to remember. In his youth, Garrosh nearly died. A disease known as the Red Pox, a lingering curse from the poisoned past of the Horde, swept through Garadar. It burned like fire beneath the skin, leaving warriors bedbound and breathless. Many died, and for days, Garrosh drifted in and out of fever dreams. He saw flashes, a massive orc, teeth bared, laughing as the sky burned, a cup filled with boiling blood, a black banner soaked in shadow, and a pair of glowing, demonic eyes watching from the stars. When he awoke, the pox had broken, but something inside him had changed. He stared at the sky for hours, not in wonder, but in fear. After the illness passed, Garrosh grew into himself, taller than most his age, broader at the shoulders, his arms corded with muscle from carrying heavy burdens, both literal and unseen. He rarely smiled. He trained harder than the others, sparring alone when no one would join him. He spoke little, but when he did, it was often in anger, sharp words thrown like spears. He did not fear pain, nor did he seek comfort. And when others laughed or praised their father's names, he would walk away into the hills. There, alone, he would climb to the top of the spirit stones, sacred altars carved with the names of fallen chieftains. He would sit in silence, not praying, just waiting. For what, he did not know. Garrosh's life might have continued in quiet exile, were it not for a figure who arrived beneath stormy skies, carried by wyvern flight and dressed in robes of black and crimson. He came not with an army, but with questions. His name was Thrall, war chief of the new horde, son of Duratan, a shaman of peace and power. Thrall had come to Nagrand seeking his roots, and to learn from the Mag'har before the old knowledge was lost. But when he met Garrosh, something stirred. Thrall sat with Golka beneath the shade of wind-twisted trees. They spoke of the past, of the wars, of Grommash. Garrosh listened from afar, heart pounding. Then Thrall asked a question that changed everything. "Does your son know what his father did?" Golka's face tightened. "No," she said softly. "He knows only the shame." And so Thrall found Garrosh by the stones and told him the truth, that Garrosh Hellscream, the orc cursed for drinking the blood, was also the one who, in the end, killed Manaroth, broke the chains of the Legion, died free with honor. Garrosh's world tilted. His entire life had been built around a lie of omission, and now, for the first time, he wept. After that night, Garrosh changed. He stood taller, walked with purpose. He began to speak of his father not with shame, but with pride. He began to believe that maybe, just maybe, honor could be reclaimed. That strength could come not just from blood, but from will. Thrall watched him carefully, and when he left to lead the Horde's forces in Northrend, he offered Garrosh a place at his side. Garrosh accepted, and as he stepped aboard the airship, leaving Nagrand behind for the first time, he clenched his fists and whispered, "I will not be my father's shadow. I will be the Hellscream who stands in the light." The journey from Nagrand to Northrend was long. Garrosh stood at the prow of the Horde sky barge, wind howling against his face, the clouds above thick and endless. Below, the seas turned to slush and ice, and ahead, just over the horizon, loomed jagged cliffs of frost and stone. He had never seen snow before, never felt air so cold that even his breath seemed to freeze as it left him. It bit at his skin through the furs, but he welcomed it. This was a land that tested the spirit, and Garrosh was ready to be tested. Beside him, Thrall stood silent, arms crossed, eyes on the north. There was worry behind the warchief's calm. Ahead lay the domain of the Lich King, lord of the Sundead Scourge, a creature born of betrayal, power, and cruelty, things Garrosh understood too well. And deep down, in the quiet of his mind, he wondered if the world would remember his name once this was over. Upon landing in Borean tundra, Garrosh was named commander of the Warsong Offensive, the Horde's military presence in Northrend. To many, this was Thrall's way of honoring Grommish's line. To others, it was a test, or a gamble. Garrosh accepted without hesitation. He donned heavy armor, reinforced with thick leather and sharpened bone. His banners, marked with the emblem of the Warsong, were hung high from towers carved into the cliffs. He surrounded himself with warriors, orcs mostly, loyal and strong. There was little room for diplomacy. Garrosh led with force, and those who questioned his orders soon learned that strength was the only coin he valued. He named his fortress Warsong Hold, and it became a hammer on the edge of the world. It wasn't long before the Alliance arrived. From the east, ships sailed into Howling Fjord, and soon they too laid claim to the frozen continent. Their objectives matched the Horde's: investigate the Scourge, break its power, and strike at the Ice Crown Citadel. But cooperation, that was not something Garrosh entertained. In Dalaran, the neutral city of magic hovering between the two factions, peace was carefully maintained. But when Garrosh crossed paths with King Varian Rin, the illusion cracked. The two men, both sons of war, both scarred by history, faced each other in a diplomatic meeting turned confrontation. Varian's voice was sharp, accusing the orcs of treachery and savagery. Garrosh, never one to swallow his pride, thundered back. "You humans claim nobility," he growled, "but your cities were built on the bones of the weak." Varian stepped forward, fists clenched, "And yours were built on the backs of slaves." Only Jaina Proudmoore's voice, calm and pleading, stood between them. It would not be the last time they stood on the edge of violence. In the frozen wasteland of Dragonblight, both Horde and Alliance forces pushed closer to Icecrown. It was there, at the Wrathgate, that their fate turned. Together they stood before the gates of the Lich King's domain, ready for a final assault. Warriors of both banners fought side by side against the endless dead, but the battle was not to be won. From the cliffs above, barrels of green alchemical fire rained down, not from the Scourge, but from the Royal Apothecary Society, a faction of the Forsaken led by the scheming Putris. The plague knew no allegiance. It consumed friend and foe alike. Garrosh was not present at the Wrathgate, but the news shook his command to its core. Horde and Alliance soldiers died choking on bile and blight. The fragile lines of trust snapped. Garrosh's rage burned bright. When the truth reached Warsong Hold, that Sylvanas' own agents had betrayed the Horde's cause, Garrosh erupted in fury. This is what you defend, thrall," he shouted in the Warchief's war tent, slamming his fist on the war table. "Cowards who twist the shadows and call it strength." Thrall stood firm. "The Forsaken act without honor, but not all among them are lost. We will find those responsible." Garrosh stepped closer, his eyes alight with scorn. "You speak of unity while your people rot. I speak of strength and the will to act." There was silence between them. Unspoken, and yet understood, the divide had begun. Despite the tensions, Garrosh's presence in Northrend grew in legend. He led assaults on Naxxramas, crushed Scourge incursions into the tundra, and held his ground against frost giants and horrors that turned the land to ice. Horde soldiers began chanting his name after victories. His war council spoke of him as a leader who did not hesitate. In his chambers, Garrosh would sometimes sit alone, staring at a small carving of an orcish wolf, a gift from a young grunt who'd called him War Chief by mistake. Garrosh had corrected him, but not harshly. He kept the carving on his table. And sometimes, when the fire burned low and the wind howled through the cracks in the walls, he would whisper to the wolf, "I will make them remember the Hellscream name." Azeroth groaned. Beneath forests and mountains, something ancient stirred and broke. The Cataclysm, they would later call it. The black dragon Deathwing, once Neltharion the Earthwarder, erupted from Deepholm, splitting continents and boiling oceans, Mountains crumbled, rivers reversed, cities vanished beneath waves, and in the fire and ruin. The horde stood at a crossroads. Thrall, once war chief, now stood at the edge of the elemental realm, tasked with saving the world itself. He was not a warlord now. He was a shaman, a bridge between mortal and spirit. But the horde needed a leader, a general, a voice that would not ask, but command. Thrall returned briefly to Orgrimmar, the horde's capital. The streets buzzed with uncertainty. Factions within the horde grew restless. The drums of war echoed louder. In the inner sanctum of Garrosh Hold he met with his advisors, Bane Bloodhoof, son of the fallen Cairn, Vol'jin, leader of the Darkspear Trolls, Eitrigg, his old comrade, and standing at the edge of the room, brooding and unblinking, Garrosh Hellscream. Thrall studied him. He remembered the orc he met in Nagrand, broken by guilt, fueled by purpose. And now, taller, armored, eyes burning like coals. In a low voice, Thrall said, "I name you War Chief in my absence. Lead the horde with strength, but never forget wisdom." The room was silent. Garrosh accepted, with a slow nod. He did not thank Thrall, not with words, only with promise. As Thrall departed, Garrosh began to remake the horde in his image. He did not dwell in diplomacy. He did not sit in endless councils. He built. Orgrimmar became a fortress, red stone replaced with black iron, wood with steel. Watchtowers lined the cliffs. Goblin engineers laid down rails and smoke-belching machines. Warships were constructed in the dry docks. Garrosh raised Korkrun Keep, his own elite guard barracks, loyal only to him. He trained orcish youths in the ways of war. He forged new alliances with the Dragonmaw clan, once loyal to Deathwing. He scorned the Forsaken and eyed the Blood Elves with suspicion. Where once the horde had been a refuge of the outcast, it was now a weapon. Garrosh's rise was not met with universal praise. Vol'jin, the voice of the trolls, warned him openly, "You be careful, mon. The horde not be made just of orcs. Don't think you walk this path alone." Garrosh sneered, "Then stay out of my way." Bane, still grieving the death of his father, Cairn, remained stoic. He saw wisdom in Thrall, but a storm brewing in Garrosh. And in secret whispers rose, that Garrosh had ambition not just to lead the horde, but to remake it in the image of the Warsong clan, his clan. That whisper turned to thunder when Cairn Bloodhoof himself challenged Garrosh, before his death, to a Mak'gora, a sacred jewel of honor. Cairn believed Garrosh's aggression endangered the soul of the horde. Garrosh, proud and unwilling to retreat, accepted. They met in the Ring of Valor, watched by thousands. Steel rang against steel. Cairn's blows were mighty, guided by years of wisdom. Garrosh fought like a storm, brutal, unrelenting, and then Cairn faltered. Poison. Garrosh's weapon had been tainted, not by him, but by Magatha Grimtotem, a traitor within the Tauren ranks. The poison slowed Cairn's heart. He collapsed, not defeated by strength, but by deceit. Garrosh roared in victory, but inside something cracked. In the days after Cairn's death, Garrosh sat alone before the great fire pit of Orgrimmar. The flames danced before him, but could not warm his thoughts. He did not regret the duel. Cairn had challenged him. But the poison, the cowardice of it, he did not ask for it. He did not want it. But now the horde had blood on its hands, and his were stained first. And still they cheered him. Still they chanted, "War Chief! War Chief! War Chief!" He clenched his fists beneath the iron cuffs. "Then I will be what they need," he whispered. "Not a symbol, not a shaman, a weapon." For 10,000 years the land of Pandaria had been shrouded in mist, a veil drawn by ancient magic to keep it safe from war, from demons, from the outside world. Its mountains rose like the backs of dragons. Its rivers curled like painted silk. And in its forests, the air was filled with the hum of cicadas and bamboo swaying in a breeze that had never known cannon fire or fell corruption. But peace never sleeps forever. And one day, the mists parted. The fleets of both Horde and Alliance, sailing far beyond familiar waters, saw new shores for the first time. Garrosh Hellscream saw something else. He saw opportunity. Garrosh did not marvel at Pandaria's beauty. He saw the ironwood trees ripe for harvesting. He saw the ancient ruins littered with secrets. He saw the unfamiliar terrain as something to conquer, and he ordered his generals to strike. Forward bases were constructed across the coastlines. Villages were secured. Supplies were taken. And where Pandaran voices asked for diplomacy, Garrosh sent silence or steel. To him, this land was not sacred. It was new, untouched, ready for the Horde. But Pandaria was unlike any land Azeroth had known. Buried beneath its soil was something ancient, something older than even the Titans' shaping. A presence, subtle, slow, and corrupting. The Shah manifestations of emotion itself, fear, doubt, anger, despair. Left behind when the old god Y'Sharj was torn from the world, these blackened echoes had slumbered until the Horde arrived. The moment conflict stirred, the Shah awakened. Where Garrosh's armies marched, shadows followed. Where soldiers bled and civilians wept, black tendrils of hate seeped from the ground. It was not a curse, it was a mirror. Garrosh watched as his enemies faltered before the Shah, Alliance forces falling into madness, even his own soldiers turning on each other in sudden, inexplicable rage. But Garrosh was intrigued. Where others recoiled from the black smoke and twisting whispers, he stepped forward. "If this power is born of emotion," he asked, "then is it not ours to command?" Pandaran elders warned him of what lay beneath, of the heart of Y'Sharj, buried in the forgotten veil. But Garrosh no longer listened to elders. He listened only to strength, and the heart was calling. Far to the east, beyond the mountains, lay the Vale of Eternal Blossoms, a sacred land said to be a font of life itself. Garrosh invaded it. He ordered goblin sappers to blast open ancient vaults. He had Mogu relics unearthed, artifacts of a cruel, Titan-forged race who had once ruled Pandaria. He enslaved creatures called Klaxi, corrupted Mantid who revered the old gods. And at last, beneath a vault sealed for 10,000 years, he found it. The heart of Y'Sharj. It beat without veins. It pulsed without breath. And when he stepped near, it recognized him. Not as an intruder, but as an heir. Garrosh did not recoil from the heart. He embraced it. He drew upon it to forge weapons of unspeakable power. He bathed his soldiers in its essence, transforming them into berserkers with blackened skin and eyes glowing with violet flame, and he himself changed, not outwardly at first, but inwardly. His voice grew colder, his commands sharper. He no longer consulted, he no longer compromised. He became a vessel, not of madness, but of will, pure, unyielding, and absolute. The Horde began to fracture. Vol'jin, once wary, now openly rebelled. He returned to the Echo Isles and rallied trolls beneath him. Bane Bloodhoof refused to send soldiers to support Garrosh's war in Pandaria, and even Sylvanas Windrunner, no stranger to darkness, watched the warchief with narrowed eyes. "You seek dominion," she said once in the war room, "but there is a difference between strength and control." Garrosh dismissed them all. "They are weak. I will build a better horde." And in the silence that followed, even his most loyal guards began to wonder. What was he becoming? But Garrosh was not done. He looked west, to the city of Theramore, jewel of the Kalimdor coast, led by Lady Jaina Proudmoore. She had long been a voice for peace between Horde and Alliance. She had sheltered survivors, welcomed refugees. She had hosted diplomats, even from Garrosh's own camp. He saw in her a threat, not of power, but of hope. And so, with the aid of goblin engineers, he constructed a mana bomb, a weapon of arcane destruction, and he dropped it on Theramore. The city was vaporized. Its people turned to dust. The harbor became a crater, and Jaina was changed forever. Garrosh returned to Orgrimmar not as a leader, but as a conqueror. He surrounded himself with Korkron, his loyal enforcers. He fortified the city with towers, warships, and forges. He expelled non-orcs. He labeled dissenters as traitors. And deep beneath the city, in the chambers of Ragefire, the heart pulsed. He had it brought there, into the underbelly of his capital. And there, it fed him. Orgrimmar had once been a city of banners, of fire pits and laughter, of tribes gathered beneath a single name, Horde. Now it was a fortress. Under Garrosh's command, the capital had been reforged, not for community, but for control. The gates, once open to all who bore the red crest, were sealed. Non-orcs were driven out. Trolls to the Echo Isles, Tauren to Thunderbluff, and the Forsaken watched always. The Korkron Guard, once the proud elite, had become enforcers of fear. They patrolled the streets in silence, black armor clanking with menace. Their boots echoed against stone as civilians bowed their heads or fled into alleyways. Garrosh ruled not from his throne, but from the shadows beneath it. In the depths of Ragefire Chasm he housed the heart of Y'Sharj, still beating, still whispering, a god long dead, but not silent. And each time Garrosh stepped into the chamber, it welcomed him. In the jungles of the Echo Isles, Vol'jin gathered his own. He trained warriors in secret, shadow hunters, beast tamers, those who remembered what the Horde once was. In Thunderbluff, Bane Bloodhoof sharpened his people's blades not for conquest, but for liberation. Even Lor'themar Theron in Silvermoon, once distant from the politics of Orgrimmar, now watched with wary eyes. They did not hate the Horde. They mourned it. "This is not our way," Bane whispered one night beside the sacred mesa. "He calls it strength, but it is fear, dressed in steel." Across the sea, the Alliance watched too. Jaina Proudmoore, her hair streaked with white, her robes burned from Theramore's destruction, stood in council with King Varian Wrynn. "Let them tear themselves apart," she hissed, "and when the dust settles, we end him." But Varian shook his head. "We end a tyrant, not a people." In the weeks that followed, envoys from Horde and Alliance met in secret, under moonlight, in caves, in ruins once sacred. It was Vol'jin who proposed it. We take back Orgrimmar. Together. For once, blades pointed in the same direction. The might of the Alliance, knights, mages, war machines, would march with the rebels. Not for dominance, but for survival. The Horde would not be destroyed. It would be reclaimed. And so it began. From the barrens of Durotar the armies came, the skies filled with griffins and wyverns. Siege engines rolled across the cracked earth, shaking the stones of the canyons. The gates of Orgrimmar, forged in black iron, groaned beneath catapult fire. Within, Garrosh stood atop the ramparts watching. He did not flinch. He did not falter. "Let them come," he whispered. "They will break against me." His voice echoed not just through the stone, but through the heart. The rebels broke through the gates. They fought through the drag, past flaming oil and Korkron berserkers. Inside the clefts and canyons, they clashed with constructs twisted by Shah energy, creatures born not of flesh, but rage. And when they reached Ragefire Chasm, the world twisted. Walls bled, the floor pulsed like muscle, and from the ceiling hung veins of black crystal, each one pulsing in time with a distant, monstrous heartbeat. At the end of the corridor, Garrosh Hellscream waited. He was no longer merely a war chief. He was something more. Garrosh stood tall, draped in blackened armor, gorehowl in his hand, veins glowing with violet light. Behind him, the heart of Y'Sharj beat in rhythm with his breath. He did not roar. He did not threaten. He simply said, "Weakness dies here." The battle that followed became legend. Heroes of both factions faced him. He summoned memories of past battles, twisted shadows of Horde glory. He struck with fury, with speed, with magic not born of the elements, but the void. But for all his power, he was still mortal. And at last, he fell. Garrosh knelt, defeated, armor cracked, blood running down his face. The heart had shattered, its black ichor bubbling into nothing, its whispers gone. Thrall stepped from the shadows, older now, heavier, eyes full of sorrow. "You dishonored your father's name," he said. Garrosh looked up, teeth bared, but he said nothing. It was Varian who stepped forward next. Let him stand trial, not as a warlord, but as a man. Chains were placed around Garrosh's wrists. They glowed with runes, not to hurt him, but to bind. For the first time, he was not in command, and the silence of the march that followed was heavier than any roar of battle. He was taken to Pandaria, to the Temple of the White Tiger, where justice would be decided not in war, but in memory. Anduin Wrynn, young and steady, offered to speak for him, not to defend, but to listen. Laura Walker Cho recorded every word. Garrosh stood, unrepentant. He was shown the deaths at Theramore, the corruption beneath Orgrimmar, the suffering of the Horde itself. And each time, "I have no regrets," he said. "I gave them strength." But justice did not come. Not yet. Among the Watchers was a bronze dragon, Kairos Dormu, bearer of a vision not of retribution, but of escape. With the vision of time, he shattered the courtroom's bindings and vanished into a portal with Garrosh at his side. To where? To when? That is the next part of our tale. Garrosh did not feel the portal. One moment he stood in Pandaria, chains heavy on his wrists, the breath of justice on his neck. The next, the world, tilted. The light changed. The air shifted. The winds no longer carried whispers, but songs of war drums, distant and ancient. He landed on Draenor, but not the Draenor he had known, not the Draenor where his mother had wept alone in Garadar, not the Draenor broken by the demon blood. This one was whole, wild, unscarred, a canvas clean. Kairos Dormu, the bronze dragon turned rebel, stood beside Garrosh. He spoke of visions, of forks in time, of what might have been. But Garrosh did not hear prophecy. He heard promise. Here the clans still roamed free. His father, Grommash, still led the Warsong clan, strong, proud, untainted. The Legion had not come. The Blood Pact had not been mad. This Draenor was his, a chance to rise again, not as a fallen son, but as a savior. He approached the Warsong camp beneath a thunderstorm. Grommash, wild-eyed, tusks bared, nearly struck first. But Garrosh raised his hands, offered no challenge, only a gift. He laid down a map, a blade, and a vision. He told Grom of what would come, of Gul'dan, of Manaroth, of slavery disguised as strength, and of how their line would be remembered, as destroyers or liberators. Grommash, ever proud, listened. He did not ask if Garrosh was truly his son. He only asked what must be done. Together they rallied the clans. Blackrock, Thunderlord, Shadowmoon, Bleeding Hollow, all called to the banner. But they would not drink demon blood. They would not serve the Legion. They would forge their own destiny in steel and flame. Thus was born the Iron Horde, war machines carved from stone and metal, cannons powered by steam and magic, warriors clad in dark iron and roaring pride. Garrosh oversaw it all. He taught them of siege, of strategy, of failure, and how to rise beyond it. He was not war chief. He was architect. With Kairos Dormu's magic, they opened a new dark portal, not into Outland, but into modern Azeroth. And once more, war returned to the world. The Iron Horde poured into the blasted lands, but the peoples of Azeroth, weary from the cataclysm, from Pandaria, from endless war, rose to meet them. Heroes crossed into Draenor to stop the invasion at its source. And in the heart of this new, old world, they found Garrosh. It was in Nagrand, where the skies still shimmered and the grass still swayed, that fate circled back. Garrosh stood atop the Ring of Trials, a sacred arena of Orcish honor. The clans surrounded him, weapons drawn. But this would not be a battle of armies. It would be a duel for judgment, for legacy, for peace. And stepping into the ring was Thrall, two sons of Draenor, one born of shamanic wisdom, one born of ancestral wrath. They did not speak much. There was nothing left to say. The battle was brutal. Garrosh fought with axe and fury, his strikes shaking the ground. Thrall called upon the elements, stone, lightning, wind, their spirits swirling around him. But the elements hesitated. They had once embraced Garrosh. Now they recoiled. And when the final blow came, a thunderous spike of earth driving through Garrosh's chest, he fell not with a scream, but with silence. The orcs said nothing. Thrall stepped back, breath ragged. There were no cheers, no banners lifted, only the wind, and a single word whispered by the grass. Hellscream. But death was not the end. Garrosh awoke, elsewhere, in a realm of twilight skies and floating towers. He was in Revendreth, one of the Shadowlands, a place for those whose pride demanded penance. Here, the Venthyr sought to break him, to make him admit his flaws, to show remorse. But Garrosh never bowed. They chained him, they punished him, they drained his soul, but he would not yield, not to guilt, not to gods, not to himself. I regret nothing, he snarled, and when his soul was finally judged, it was not sent onward, it was consumed, not in damnation, but in defiance. And so the tale ends, of a boy who grew beneath a shadow, of a warrior who mistook pride for strength, of a war chief who lost his people chasing a dream they never asked for. Garrosh Hellscream was no monster, nor was he a martyr. He was something far more tragic. A son who tried to outgrow his father and became the echo of his worst mistakes. Sleep now, traveler, the fire fades, the war drums are silent. Let your thoughts drift through Nagrand skies, through winds that whisper of what was and what might have been. Rest now, for the battle is done, and even the fiercest warrior must sleep. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this quiet journey through the life and legacy of Garrosh Hellscream, we invite you to gently support the channel by tapping like, clicking subscribe, and ringing the notification bell, so you'll never miss another whispered tale from Azeroth. Your support helps us keep the fire lit and the stories flowing night after night. Let us know in the comments which legend you'd like us to explore next. And until we meet again, sleep well, traveler. May your dreams be peaceful and your spirit ever brave.